Good morning and welcome to Global Sri Lankan Forum International Affairs Talk Show, World Vision. I'm Ruan Pereira, Director International Affairs. Joining me today is Dr. Srimal Fernando, PhD in International Affairs and an advisor, global editor for the Diplomatic Society for South Africa in partnership with Diplomatic World Institute in Brussels. Welcome to the show, Srimal. Yeah, let's start with the recent tragic event occurred in Pakistan in early December. So a Sri Lankan national who has been working in Pakistan city of Sialkot was brutally murdered by a mob with links to extremists. We would like to convey our deepest sympathies to the family of Mr. Priyantha Kumar first. Yeah, it's a tragic event. So we have this tragic event occurred in Pakistan and it shocked the entire world, including Sri Lanka. So it's hard to understand why such things occurred, but we can talk about that with the current political atmosphere in the region and in Pakistan particularly. So I believe that with the changes in Afghanistan, so there has been uh, encouragement or motivation to the extremist elements because Taliban won their battle in Afghanistan, which is the nearby country to Pakistan, right? And it has been a prolonged war. So ultimately, so they were able to defeat the military might of superpowers in a nutshell, right? In the 80s, they fought the mighty military power of Soviet Union, and then in 2000s they fought the military might of United States. So in both cases, so they were not able to win any face-to-face war, I believe, like any sort of conventional warfare, but they were able to sustain their fight against these forces as a guerrilla groups, right? As guerrilla groups. So with these things, so somehow uh, I think just like the Soviet withdrawal, so the United States withdrew from Afghanistan and leaving the country for Taliban. So this is considered by the religious extremists as a victory for themselves, right? And as we all know, there is a Taliban fraction in Pakistan as well, Pakistan Taliban. What they do is they are also fighting for the similar values. So in one hand, Pakistan is supporting Taliban indirectly, right? So they don't claim it, but the it's widely believed that there is some sort of assistance from Pakistan, not directly. But on the other hand, a similar group is fighting in Pakistan against the Pakistani government and promoting similar values. So that's what I see. So I believe this tragic event occurred in that backdrop, and when the society, part of the society is polarized or part of the society is infected with extremism, so we can expect this type of situation, and we admire the Pakistani Prime Minister for taking firm actions. But I believe that these elements, like extremist elements, are very much in power in Pakistan, and we can't exactly predict what will be the fate of Pakistan uh, in the coming years, right? So when it comes to Sri Lanka Pakistan relations, so they have the relations have been very good for decades, and this is a black mark. Yet the leaders from both countries were trying to mitigate. That's what I can see from that perspective.
Yes, firstly, my condolences go out to Priyantha's family. As a region, we are saddened by this incident in Pakistan, and but we cannot point at the Pakistan government as SAARC countries. We are united. Extremism is there even in our region and even outside regions. Also, there could be an outside hand to disturb the bilateral, trilateral relationships in this region. So SAARC as a region is upcoming, with India being the largest nation, and 8 countries have done very well. We cannot point at states sponsoring towards extremism. This is a very isolated incident, a very tragic incident. It cannot happen in our region, but there is a clear indication that outside nations are involved. Maybe it's a hypothesis, to disturb certain elements between two nations or a regional component.
Mhm.
As
So,
you said,
Dr. Srimal, can you elaborate on how an external force could be involved here?
if we go back to the history from the Cold War period, even beyond that, to the British Raj period, divide and rule policy has been there in this region. Earlier, if we take India, it was called Sindhustan, starting from Afghanistan up to Bangladesh and Myanmar. But today, these are several nations, several nationalities have been created. And the divide and rule policy had benefited benefited certain outside region. But we cannot still, when we come to this incident, we cannot point at a state because facts are not coming up yet. We know the Pakistan government has done its best to curtail this matter. Extremism is coming up due to other socio-economic factors in our region. In the recent past, we saw the pullout of United States forces from Afghanistan, and this has caused a destability in the region because the region has gone in one direction for the last 12 years because Afghanistan is a part of SARC, and Afghanistan borders Pakistan, and Pakistan borders India. These are our regional countries, and this is a hypothetical question that I am posing, that there could be an outside element causing this, but there are no facts from the security point of view coming up from either the Pakistan government or from outside to point at this. But we can see clear indications to see the region being destabilized by Islamic extremism or other type of extremism. Pakistan has been a stable nation. It's one of the second largest economic states that contribute to the SARC in a greater way. And also, these elements even could be to destabilize the relationship between India and Pakistan and with the countries like Sri Lanka. So I doubt there are state-sponsored elements in any part of this region to destabilize any of these SARC countries. But as a region, we have to watch closely whether outside nations or extremist elements are trying to creep into this situation and create instability in our region when this region is hit by a pandemic and it's going through a new unfolding situation has come up even in economics, socio, as well as security aspects. Thank you, Ruwan. You may continue.
Yes. Thanks, Srimal. Actually, yeah, I believe like there could be a foreign element, to be honest. Yeah, right. So I think that this the story about the foreign element, I think so. There were speculations that the incident occurred in Sri Lanka was also a result of foreign activities, like I mean, backed by foreign intelligence services. So we cannot rule out the same scenario in Pakistan. So it could be like this, right? So there is extremism in Pakistan. Certain percentage of the society is actually infected, I can say, and with that, so they must be planning certain activities. But a foreign intelligence service can obviously influence them through online or through other means um, to motivate them further to carry out the action. So that we can rule out. We can expect, right? So we can speculate that. But I believe that this is mostly homegrown, and the reason is that the extremist elements have encouraged by the recent victory in Afghanistan, right? And Taliban Pakistan is an organization which is loosely linked to Taliban in Afghanistan, and they are fighting for Islamic State in Pakistan. So I have been following them recently, and I heard that they have uh, they have ended the ceasefire between Pakistani Taliban and the government of Pakistan. So what it says is that they will start hostilities, and then they have been They have engaged in violent activities throughout the last 10 to 15 years, and this ceasefire is ending very soon. Right? It has ended. So therefore, we can expect hostilities between Pakistan armed forces and these fragments. Also, they have claimed that Pakistan Taliban is aligned with Afghanistan Taliban. So I saw a clip today that Afghanistan Taliban has refused it, rejected that they have any official ties to Taliban in Pakistan. Yet, it is very clear they are following more or less the same ideology. So the Afghan Talibans have been successful in creating an Islamic state in Afghanistan with Sharia law, and the ultimate aim of the Pakistan Taliban is to create a similar state in Pakistan. So they have accused Pakistan that Pakistanis do not take religion seriously. They must be referring to the majority, right? So they have put out demands for Pakistani government, right? So implement Sharia law and certain things, right, to make it a Pakistan. So I am not sure how far would Pakistan or Pakistan as a nation like to go on this path, right? To go towards the towards a religious state. Of course, officially Pakistan is called Islamic Republic of Pakistan, but from Taliban point perspective, it is not religious enough, and they want to implement. They want to create a state very similar to Afghanistan. So this is very clear, and the Pakistani civilian government as well as the military and the intelligence service is in danger. I think so. They are facing this threat, and if if no other country get involved, so uh, this will grow and create instability in Pakistan.
Yes. Yes, Ruan. I mean, there are two elements that you mentioned. One is an internal matter of Pakistan. The other one is an internal matter of Afghanistan. But as a region, Afghanistan and Pakistan are our South Asian neighbors, and they are part of the SAARC agenda. As SAARC, SAARC as well as South Asia, we have to move forward. Democracy is an important element, whether it comes to Afghanistan or Pakistan or to the global affairs. The people's right, there, every nation, whether it comes to Pakistan, there is a constitution. Well, people in Afghanistan have partially accepted the new Afghan government. So it is the rightful right of the Afghanistan people to choose their path, how they will deal with their country. Whether it's socio-economic, cultural affairs come in that boundaries. And Pakistan has come into a peace agreement with its conflicting party, and it is an internal security matter how they should stabilize their nation. Even small nations like Sri Lanka also had ceasefire agreements in the past. And even many countries, bigger nations also have dealt with conflicting parties. If you go to the recent past of peace accords with Taliban, which was negotiated and signed in Doha, Qatar with United States, was a fine example where the United States had to pull with agreement out of Afghanistan. So a new government has come into power in Afghanistan, and they have to choose their path with the regional neighbors. If a nation cannot be isolated, whether it's Pakistan or Afghanistan, they cannot isolate themselves. They have to work with bigger nations like India and the smaller nations. This is the way forward for SAARC nations to work. But we don't need regional instability. We have to work for regional stability in security matters. If one of the 8 nations have a security concern, it has to be brought forward to the table in the SAARC consortium.
Yes. One question to you, Srimal.
Yes.
So, yes, Afghanistan is part of SAARC, and after the handover of power to Taliban, so how many governments have acknowledged Afghanistan so far? I believe none of them have officially recognized Afghanistan, right?
Yes, I mean, that is a external matter, if we put it. But
Mhm.
internally, there are over 20 million people in Afghanistan, and it's an internal dynamics. I think the best way forward for the new Afghan Taliban government that is in power to come into a democratic path, work with all minorities, work with other fractions who are in the opposition in that country, and bring a democratic rightful path where the people will have the right, even if Taliban is there. In the end, that is the right of the people of any country. Will only bring recognition to a government like that. Whether Because that's the transition. Okay, we have to go in practical terms. We have to go in realistic terms to deal with a nation. So, accepting or non-accepting, will it serve the purpose of the Afghan people? Is a question that I can pose to the policymakers. And also, we have to cooperate with our neighbors. I'm talking from a regional perspective, coming from a SAARC nation. I want to see my region stabilize. Whatever the government in one of these 8 countries is an internal matter where the people of that country have to decide. Being coming from outside nation within that realm, it's our duty to stabilize our nearest neighbors and to work for it. And also, external countries coming from the North-South cooperation have to work in a non-alignment manner, because the world is going through an economic crisis due to the pandemic. And in the end, it impacts the social behavior and the economic behavior and the well-being of the people. So that is the concern at this point, also taking into consideration of security aspects and democratic elements. Thank you, everyone.
Mhm. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, Srimal. Yes, of course. I think not many nations have recognized Afghanistan, and it will remain a issue. Yet they are facing a lot of difficulties internally, especially economic difficulties. As far as I know, their foreign reserves are with the United States, so they can use them. And I heard there are food shortages for 95% of the population. So these are these are things that these are the things that the world need to pay attention to, because when a country is controlled by religious extremist group, and then that country undergoes a lot of difficulties, so there is the tendency for them to use different means to influence the other countries, and one such way is terrorism. So so exporting terrorism from Afghanistan to me is a question, and it is a likely scenario. So therefore, I'm not sure how the world will respond. United States left Afghanistan with a clear understanding of the consequences, and the consequences which the neighboring countries will have to pay. So that I believe that the neighboring countries are paying the consequences, especially the closest ally of Afghanistan, which is Pakistan, right? And so that's what I would like to say about Afghanistan. So at the same time, you mentioned about the democracy. So I build, and so it's a good point to discuss. So we had the so United States started a meeting of global democracies of the world, and there were around 110 countries invited for the summit. So unfortunately, Sri Lanka was not invited. So this is, to me, is something. It's a slap on the face for Sri Lanka, because Sri Lanka has been a democracy continuously since 1948, and we never had a military government, and we held elections every 5 years or 10 years and elected a new government. So having such a practice, right? And it is really sad to see that we were not invited. So at the same time, Pakistan was invited for this summit, but Pakistan refrained from attending. So there are so I listen to certain analysis by some political pundits, and so that they have not gone there, they have not attended because due to the pressure from China, because China was not invited. So only 110 countries were invited. The countries which were not invited um, are mostly Middle Eastern countries, and then some African countries, and include Bangladesh as well, right? So that is another surprise. Bangladesh was not invited, and in my knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong. So China, on the other hand, has become furious over this summit. China and Russia both, and China has claimed that it is a democracy. So it's not a democracy in the conventional sense, but they claim it to be a democracy based on centralized democratic theory, right? So they don't have elections the way we have in our popular democracies, but they have a way of electing members to their councils in the shape of a pyramid, I believe, right? So the lowest level is elected with the popular vote, and then that that elected body elects the next level, the kind of indirect democracy, right? So that's what they have claimed. And Russia, on the other hand, is a democracy. They have elections, but there is wide criticism from West about the form of democracy which they practice, and there is accusation about uh, the suppression of opposition, etc. So that's where it stands. So I'm not exactly clear what Biden wanted to achieve by this summit, but one thing is clear, that they want to draw the line. They want to corner China and Russia, to, showing that they are authoritarian countries and these are the democracies, right? So we have all the democracies on our side to face any aggression from your side.
Uh, yes, a very good point, Ruan. And I think democracy is a very essential element to the global community. 1/5 of the world lives in 1/5 of the population in the world lives in South Asia, and the largest amount of people live in the oldest democracy. That's one of the oldest democracies in this region is India and the nearby countries. Most of these countries gained independence in 1940s, towards mid 40s or late 40s, with British bringing in the Commonwealth of democratic system. It's like Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, or later, and even Sri Lanka. Democracy has prevailed in democratic systems, and democratic governance has prevailed in India and Sri Lanka for many years. We have strong bilateral bonds in our region. Sri Lanka not being invited to the democratic forum is a concern as well as a sad thing, because what is the meaning of democracy is the thing that has to come. Whether you are going to deal with the minorities or the majority thought is the key. Biden administration initiating this democratic forum is a great thing to the world. This is the first summit. Anything starts with a small one step, and it will take a long route. There are many thousand steps to go. I think I do not know the parameters and the credentials that the Democratic Summit has set up for smaller nations or regional nations, how they should participate, and what are the credentials and what are the criteria to be qualified to the summit. But I think the meaning of democracy should have been conveyed through this message, whether it's bigger nations or smaller nations or undemocratic or socialist or whatever the social thought or political thought. Every nation should have been invited, and their thoughts should have been tabled in this forum, and the clear message, the democratic countries that are more advanced in their systems should have shared and brought in a plan so that there are more engagements and a better system. And in the end, it's not isolating one regime or a particular a community or a political group. In the end, the people's thoughts belongs to democracy, social thought, Marxism, anything. But everything is a democratic thing. Everyone has the right to speak. So Biden administration has done a great job by initiating Democracy Summit in 2021. And I believe in the next summit, nations that were not invited from SAARC will be invited, because 1/5 of the population stays in this region, and we, as a region of South Asia, we can give a clear message to the North-South cooperation and bring a more peaceful world and a more stabilized world in this system. That is the meaning of a democratic summit, and that is the meaning of democracy. People's participation, people's thoughts coming into the thing, and that's how I will end my opinion and comment for your question.
Yes, Srimal. Thanks for the feedback, and I believe yes. So the summit as a whole is a good move, right? It's good to have a summit for democratic nations, and it's good to promote democracy, right? So we are all for that, right? And Sri Lanka has been a champion of democracy, and yes, of course there are areas for us to improve, but in my understanding, Sri Lanka has been a very good democracy, relatively a good democracy compared to many other countries in the world. Yes,
One more question. Yeah,
yes,
we as SAARC countries, we should have our own democratic summit where all the 8 nations come.
yes.
And we should have performed the platform and give the message to all these North-South corporations on platforms, the message. I
Yes.
think that's one of the suggestions I could bring in here. Thank you.
Yes,
Yeah,
I
sorry.
think I think
Yeah.
that's a good suggestion, right? For the SAARC countries to have such a summit. Yet I think so there are certain countries which we might have to exclude, because if we hold a summit under the name of democracy, so the countries included have to be democracies, right? But having said that, I would like to discuss another topic which is widely discussed in the international forums, international news. So that is the issue between Ukraine and Russia. So Russians have been gathering troops near the Ukraine border for a while, and then it is estimated that around 175,000 troops are stationed near the Ukraine border, and that's threatening the stability in Europe and in the world, right? Yeah. So that's threatening the stability in Europe. So therefore, we have to. I think there are discussions between NATO countries and Russia. So there was a phone call between Russian president and the president of the United States recently, where they
Uh,
discussed the ways to mitigate this issue. So Russia has been nervous due to the build up, like due to the expansion of NATO after the fall of Soviet Union. So the NATO has been expanding to the east at a rapid pace, and right now, currently, Baltic states are under NATO. They are NATO members: Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. I believe three of them. Right? They used to be part of the Soviet Union, and Poland was not part of the Soviet Union, yet they belong to the same camp, right? They belong to the Warsaw Pact organization, and Poland is part of the organization. I believe Georgia once applied for the membership. I'm not exactly sure if they were admitted. If they were, so then they are part of NATO as well. So this expansion has made Russia nervous in the past throughout this period, and this appears to be a natural reaction to NATO expansion. Ukraine has applied for the membership, but they have not been granted yet. So, so part of the Ukraine, as we all know, has been fighting to become independent from Ukraine, and this is the area with a larger Russian minority, Russian-speaking minority, the eastern part of Ukraine, right? So, having Russia annexed Crimea in 2014, so West is really skeptical if Russians will invade Ukraine in the winter, upcoming winter, and annex part of another part of Ukraine, the western part, the eastern part of Ukraine, right? So there are speculations if Russia moves ahead and invade Ukraine, what will be the reaction from NATO? So NATO has uh, clearly said that they are not willing to go to war over Ukraine because they don't have the obligation to protect Ukraine against any third party aggression because they are not a NATO member. But they have affirmed that they will put more sanctions, economic sanctions against Russia, United States, and the European Union. So that was the discussion. That is where it stands now. I believe, and Russians, on the other hand, Russians have put forward certain demands, right? So one being the non-exclusion of any ex-Soviet states in NATO, right? So what they have simply asked is not to extend NATO to the former Soviet states, ex-Soviet states, which have broken away from the from Russia since 1992 period, right? But some of them have already joined, right? So they must be referring to the remaining states such as Belarus, Ukraine, and then Armenia, and certain states, right? And the states in Central Asia. I mean, they can't join NATO theoretically yet. So Russia is nervous about that, and I saw that some from the European Union have commented that Russia is seeking veto power in who can join NATO and who cannot, right? So that's where it stands, and I would like to invite you to give some thoughts about that.
Yes, coming back to Russia, these are one of the 5 permanent members in the United Nations. Russia and Ukraine share historical bonds which go to thousands of, to at least to 3,000, 3 millennia, I guess. I mean, it is a historical bond, culturally bonded, and also politically bonded later with Soviet Union formation, right? As a region, Russia is one of the biggest nations in that northern part, and also they will have security concerns. I'm really happy, as well as it's a very wise and intelligent thought by Biden administration and Putin administration to have a conversation and come on to a dialogue at a very critical juncture, where two nations like Russia and Ukraine are in a very tenseful situation on a security matter, on a border issue. Also, Ukraine and Russia share cultural bonds, linguistic bonds, and a certain part of the minority are also Russian. So there needs a political settlement internally for Russia, to Ukraine, and also Russia as a bigger nation has to think of small nations' sovereignty. Sovereignty is the utmost thing, whether it comes to Russia or whether it comes to Ukraine or to any other nations. External parties like United States and the European nations should act wisely and intelligently to diffuse tension between Russia and Ukraine at this point, where Ukrainians don't suffer, and economically, security-wise, because it's the concern of the international community that that region is peaceful. And because that peaceful secures gas, because gas comes from Russia to most of the European countries, and winter is a key period in the world where gas is required for many of the European countries for challenging atmospheric environmental issues, to deal in energy issues on gas. And I think I'm sure Russia will be wise enough, and also new Ukrainian government that is having this challenging situation will come on to a dialogue path and settle its internal matters with the nearest neighbor and the dearest neighbor, which is Russia. And they are also, I mean, these are historical bonds where external parties cannot interfere and settle. These bigger nations who are bordering have to settle their own issues, because these are neighbors. Others cannot give wise advice on another region. And I think new Biden administration is coming on to a very chartered out path to deal with NATO and Russia's concerns of not giving membership in the NATO alliance is also a security concern coming from a Russian point. Those considerations have to be taken to neutralize the matter with the nearest neighbor, Ukraine. So it's a give and take policy, and I think, and it's a very good democratic path. The new United States administration is charting out, whether it comes to the Afghan policy or Ukrainian policy. I am sure the United States and the European Union will be able to diffuse, I think already through these dialogues between Russia and the United States, and even with Ukraine, this situation slowly will fade off, and a new system might come into place, a new democratic, a more constitutional path will come into place in Ukraine, and this situation will have a better future, and these unnecessary, uncertain situations will fade off. I think that is what I can see as an observer, and that is an opinion.
Yes, yes,
Yeah, yes,
yes. Thanks.
yeah.
Yes. So I think I think in the backdrop of the Democratic Summit, China and Russia held another summit, right? Chinese President Xi Jinping and then Russian President Putin, right? So they have decided to back each other. So they have committed to back each other in security concerns, right? So that means that they are kind of entered into an unofficial security pact that if one country is attacked, the other country will intervene. So there is no formal treaty between them, but the understanding is that, right? So when United States is gathering democracies against the authoritarian regime, so they have come into this understanding. So anyway, the relations between China and Russia has been improving throughout the last 3 decades, and then it is being elevated to the next level, it seems, right? So China, on one hand, has a claim for Pakistan, for Taiwan, and Russia is planning to take part of Ukraine. Planning to take means at least try to neutralize the expansion of NATO, right? So it is a win-win situation for both countries, right? So then each can stand by the other's claim, so that which is mutually beneficial. So what I see is in case of Ukraine, so we can go back to the history, right? So at the time of when Soviet Union fell in 1990s, so the idea was to end the Cold War, right? So there was consensus on not having not extending the Cold War, which is a danger to the entire humanity, right? So there was this compiling of nuclear arms. I heard that the Soviet Union had around 45,000 nuclear warhead in late 80s, versus 25,000 nuclear warheads for United States, right? So since then, this number of active warheads have been reduced dramatically due to different treaties, and mainly due to the end of Cold War, right? So the main aim of the West and the entire world and the former Soviet Union was to end the Cold War, right, by securing the 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 the, the continuity of humanity, right? But there was no plans for NATO expansion, right? So NATO and Warsaw Pact organizations were created to face each other, right? So when Warsaw Pact organization was dissolved, so NATO should at least maintain status quo, or at least it could have been dissolved, right? So instead, it was growing. I think this is a point of concern for anybody, right? So if you formed an organization due to a threat, when the threat has diminished, right? So why would you maintain it? Like, okay, if you choose to maintain it, that's fine, but then why would you expand it, right? So that must be the question to raise. I think this recent issues between Russia and the West is a result of NATO expansion, which is not uh, justifiable phenomenon, justifiable thing after the end of Cold War. Right now, yeah, of course, Russia is resurgent. Russia is coming back to the scene. Like, so they have developed their economy to a certain extent and renovated or like rejuvenated the arsenal, like military arsenal, nuclear arsenal, etc. So now there is some justification for NATO, but still expanding it into the Eastern Europe will cause more issues, and especially a time when Biden administration has shown its weakness, right? Through the way it acted in Afghan crisis, right? During the Afghan crisis, most in the United States, especially the right wing, criticizes the Biden administration for being for acting weak in front of the entire world. And what they say is that when you act weak, so the other powers will try to take the advantage, right? So they will pursue Biden administration as a weak administration, and they will try to take advantage of that. So usually in the United States, in their internal politics, Biden is considered to be a weak leader and an unpopular leader, and his vice president Kamala Harris is considered to be even more unpopular, right? So she's considered to be one of the least popular vice presidents in the history, and she doesn't show the political maturity required by a vice president of the United States. So that's what I can see. So we hope that Russia Western tensions will end soon without igniting a third world war.
Yes. Um, when you come to the now, there are three elements in your question. One is about Russia-China new alliance, as well as Biden administration taking a more softer stand, right? In when it comes to external matters. I think coming back to your last point, let me start with that. Biden and the other element is a historical part, because I mentioned three elements, is how socialism and democracy and the new world order came into place. So there are three elements in this question that you have raised. Coming back to the last point, it's about Biden administration taking a softer stand in global affairs. I think it is only about nearly 1 year since Biden administration has come. It is with the baggage that comes with the previous administration that he had to neutralize certain matters when it comes to external policies. Biden administration has taken a very good policy manifestation when it comes to external affairs with developing nations or nations that the United States forces were occupying, and it's a non-aggressive path. I think that is the way. So, and also that has helped diplomatically to deal with more nations. United States is winning the hearts and minds of many nations that they distanced themselves in the previous period. So, first thing, when it comes to external policy of a nation, any nation, whether it's big or small, they have to have win the hearts and minds of the people of other nations. How to do that? Not being aggressive. Listen to the other parties and what to do. Then your external policy becomes strong. External policy being strong means internal policy will be strong. That is the approach. If your external policy is more aggressive and you are not winning the hearts and minds of other people, your internal, you don't have friends. You are working without friends. You don't have people to help. You can show your aggressiveness, but it's short-lived. So that is the message that I can give to the other bigger nations. So if a nation is insecure, that there is a reason why it is insecure. It's insecure in front of the other party, enemy, due to their lack of external policies, not having a very approachable approach where they haven't won friends or enemies from the other hand, and how to implement a democratic thought into a majoritarian thought. Okay, let me go a little bit further on the other point. Well, in the last 200 years, the world has become more industrialized. With that comes the labor class and the ruling class, where the ruling class started dominating the democratic class, and where the labor class got isolated. That's where the social thought, communism, Das Kapital, Marxism came up. And how come the world became into two poles? Socialism, democracy, and Western world, and the Southern world. So that's where the China and Russia became part of that old Soviet Union, China, and the socialist glory that came into the South-South cooperation, NAM alliance, the developing world, the world, all that with North-South. So I think the way the alliance has happened between Russia and China, it's a social thought that comes from end of World War II, and also the socialism growing in most of the newly industrialized states. Britain, European Union, and America before the World War was more industrialized, even Germany. That's why they had advanced capitalist policies. But later, the newly industrialized states like China, Russia, and the socialist world, most of the socialist countries with democratic socialism came up. So with that, now you can clearly understand what I'm trying to mention. So it is a very good approach from the United States point of view when it comes to the external policies to deal with socialist nations, listen to their thoughts, and how to bring their external policy more stabilized. This is what we go back to the 1990s when the Berlin Wall fell, because the Reagan administration listened to perestroika approach of President Gorbachev, and that's how the curtains, the iron curtains, fell off, and the European East and West European Union came together because they listened and they had an approach. So this is the path the Biden administration is doing. That is called democracy. I think further they have to mellow down the credentials the democratic capitalist approach had. So when you soften down more and more, other smaller nations with smaller powers will engage with United States, and they will win the hearts and minds. And the similar approach, China and Russia should start idealizing with their nearest neighbors and with the global world, where their external policies will be stronger. That makes the internal policy stronger, and your security concerns will be greater than what you are. That's how I will end.
Yes, Srimal, yes, yes. I see some positive aspects of the Biden administration. Yes, it started with the intention of improving relations with the countries around the world, especially her allies, right? So the accusation to the Trump administration was that it was distancing its allies, it was distancing U.S. allies, and getting closer to the former enemies, right, or the authoritarian countries. But with the Biden administration, they were expected to act differently. But I think what we witnessed was something different, right? So during the Afghan crisis, or the at the time of withdrawal, Biden has taken the decision unilaterally without informing any of her allies, right? So that was one incident, right? And when it comes to improving relations with the other countries, what they have done recently, right? So they have initiated a democratic session, which is a positive thing, but excluded some democratic countries like Sri Lanka and Bangladesh from the list, right? So I see that generally democratic regimes in the United States, democratic administrations in the United States are friendlier towards the smaller nation and to third world, to the Asia, Africa, and Latin American countries. But what we see from Biden administration is some sort of inconsistency in their conduct. But having said that, I would like to move our attention to to our region, to the region of South Asia, right? So when it comes to Sri Lanka-India relations, we see some sort of improvements, right? So Sri Lanka-India relations have been improving at a certain pace, like during the last few months, and we can see more and more interactions between Sri Lanka and India. At the time, Sri Lanka sees some issues in her all-weather friendship with China, right? So China has been the all-weather friend along with Russia for Sri Lanka for a long period of time, right? Yet, in recently we see some disputes, especially the disputes over fertilizer and disputes over certain projects in the north, right? So I saw China has withdrawn from some solar power projects in the northern province, and Chinese embassy has directly involved in a commercial dispute between the government of Sri Lanka and a commercial entity in China, right? So uh, we are yet to see the dynamics, and we recently heard that Sri Lanka is in discussion with India for an economic relief package uh, to for Sri Lanka to deal with her economic difficulties. So as far as I know, Sri Lanka has to pay around $6 billion in the coming year, and Sri Lanka is short of foreign remittances, right? So Sri Lanka has lost foreign remittances uh, from uh, from expat workers, and also from exports, right, and tourism, right? So due to these three aspects, so Sri Lanka is running short of foreign currencies, foreign reserves, and India and Sri Lankan finance minister has approached India, right? And if there will be a relief package, this will drive Sri Lanka further closer to India, right? So it is interesting to see how this will be seen by Beijing and how things will unfold.
Yes, Ruan. Now you're talking, your question and the opinion is about India's, Sri Lanka's relations with India and China. Yes, there are a few elements when we come to this relationship. It's about the power matrix between bigger nations and smaller nations, and also about hegemony on external foreign policy manifestation. And the third one is about bandwagoning. With what group a small nation will bandwagon, with what alliance? So coming back to the internal dynamics, let's divide the relations of Sri Lanka, India, and with Sri Lanka's relations with India and China into three phases. One is before conflict, one is after conflict, and this is the latest new government's approach to India and China. So the new government, when it came in the past 2 years, they manifested a new foreign policy called India First. So the new government's first policy was an India First approach. But when it comes to the 2005-2014 government, which was a pro-China approach, bandwagoning with another group of China Socialist Alliance, with that, because there was an economic component in that during the post-conflict period, where after 2009. Before 2009, there was a security concern for Sri Lanka's internal stability and as a unitary state, where Sri Lanka had to depend from your nearest and dearest neighbor, India, which has historical, linguistic, as well as it's the closest, one of the closest neighbors as a small nation. Yes, India always stood by Sri Lanka when there was a need, whether it's a disaster, whether it was a conflict, and whether it was an economic need. That is what the new government of Sri Lanka, it is the new government of Sri Lanka that approached India and wanted help and relief and to cushion their economic burdens from these external matters to bring comforts to the people. So India is ready to help economically and with currency swaps, with health and other food security concerns for Sri Lanka, and to bring credit lines to soften and bring our reserves up. So that will bring stability to one of the dearest neighbors. India always wants their regional neighbors to be strong. That is what I always say. SAARC is an important component. The largest country of that is India. With India being our motherland, we have to work out with our neighbors. But China also, it is another bigger nation that provided certain economic supports during the post-conflict period. And now we have run into certain security concerns and diplomatic concerns due to our internal policy orientation manifestation. These things we have to, as a nation, whether the people of Sri Lanka support the opposition or the current government, the policy is policy. External policy is external policy. Currently, Sri Lanka's external policy towards India is India first, and India's foreign policy towards its neighbor is neighborhood first policy. So that itself clears out many things, because it's a policy, not a individual thought or a particular regime thought or a political process. I'm glad to see and happy to see Sri Lanka-India relations growing up, and we are working out on our bilateral issues, making it stronger, making it more strategically important, because India is an aspiring nation, rising nation, trying to be a permanent member of the United Nations. And India has been a part of the non-alignment movement, South-South cooperation, for a long period. And Sri Lanka and India, one of the oldest democracies in our South Asia region. We can work together, our region can work together, and it should be an example to the other regions. Earlier, if I just go a little bit beyond our region, European Union, there were many conflicts before the World War, whether it's the East or West. Today, European Union with 27 countries are working together in one thought, one process, one visa, one currency. SAARC should also work on this matter. And I think in the next 10 years, we are seeing it. Yes, other bigger nations like United States, China, and Japan, and all these economical, even Russia, it's an important nation. The 5 important nations like Germany, France, Britain, these are important. Even Britain has ruled our nation. These are important nations that we have to work out, because we have to always win the hearts and minds of all nations, because we are a small nation. We are vulnerable. We have to bandwagon. We should be non-aligned, not bandwagon, non-aligned. Have a balanced external policy. The policy is the key. It's not individual thought. It's not the individual political state thought. We have to have a policy. It's the nation's thought. It's the people's thought. It's the parliament's thought. That's where we can progress as a small nation like Sri Lanka, like Singapore, and we will be successful. It is very clear from Sri Lanka's approach towards India being India first policy. That with that I end this note.
Yes. So thanks, thanks, Srimal. I think it's a good observation, and it's a good trend that Sri Lanka is improving ties with India, right? So Sri Lanka's relations with India hasn't been very smooth all the time. So there were good times and bad times, right? So for example, in mid-90s, we experienced some aggression from India, and there was and India imposed a treaty on Sri Lanka, like in her attempt to end the armed conflict in the north and east, right? So this time, I think we have improved our relations. We have come a long way since that point, and then we have been improving the relations, right? And then the current improvement we see with the positive light. At the same time, we are curious to know what entails these improved relations, right? So when Sri Lanka is likely to if Sri Lanka gets receives a relief package from Sri Lanka, we need to be vigilant if there are conditions attached like to that, right? For example, if India is forcing Sri Lanka to implement 13th Amendment, giving further powers to the provincial councils, it will not be accepted by the majority of the public, right, including GSLF, right? So as GSLF, we would like to state that we are firmly against any move, any conditions in such an agreement with India, right? So we welcome improved relations with India, but at the same time, Sri Lankan government should refrain from giving any concessions which threaten her sovereignty, right? So Sri Lanka is a sovereign nation. We welcome commercial interactions with any other nation, including India, and we would like to work together in many aspects of development, but we are not ready to compromise our sovereignty and territorial integrity, right? So if it is diminishing due to a certain condition in such agreement, so we have to oppose it, right? As Global Sri Lankan Forum, we would like to clearly state that we welcome good relations with India. At the same time, we want to prevent any negative impacts or negative conditions being imposed on us directly or indirectly. And
Yes, yeah.
with that,
Go ahead.
Srimal, I would like to get your final thoughts, and we can conclude then.
Yes. Ruan, yes, Indo-Sri Lanka relationship is a age-old bond, coming with Hinduism and Buddhism. Buddhism is the greatest gift India gave to Sri Lanka, right? So the majority of Sinhalese are Buddhist, as well as once Mahatma Gandhi, when he visited Sri Lanka, said Sri Lanka is the daughter state of India. So India, the father of the nation is Mahatma Gandhi. He himself says it's a daughter state. So India considered Sri Lanka as its daughter, one of his children. So no mother is going to do any destruction to his daughter or son. In the recent past, when it comes to the recent manifestations, India's approach during the post-conflict period, India bridged the railway line, relayed the northern Indian railway line from south to north, 150 kilometers, which was destroyed during the terrorism period. If India wants to bring instability to Sri Lanka, India will not help with intelligence, security, and do reconstruction processes during the past few years. Yes, this great improvement, the nearest neighbor and the dearest neighbor, is an important thing. Coming back to the 13th Amendment, in 1987, 88, 89, this unfolding situation with the 13th Amendment came into picture. The important element here is about land rights and the police rights, which is not being given. 13 plus means that other rights can be negotiated, which is already 13th Amendment is part of the Sri Lankan constitution, and it's there. Provincial council systems are there. And more greater power devolution from center to the regions have been there. Yes, it is acceptable to all communities that there should be a power devolution. But the security concern here is about police powers and land powers, which should not be negotiated in any form, because that will secure a small nation's integrity, sovereignty, and all. And also with that, I think the right mindset is there with India First policy and non-interventionist policy manifested in India's foreign policy in the recent past. You can see it clearly in Gujarat doctrine of India and India's neighborhood first policy, that it doesn't intervene or interfere in internal matters of South Asian countries, but it deals in a more pleasant manner, having dialogues and trying to settle internal matters so that the largest nation, India, is secured with security issues. And what Sri Lanka's latest foreign policy, India First policy, is that it ensures security to the nearest neighbor, India. So that is the policy that I conclude, and we will stand by our nearest neighbor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Srimal. Thanks, Dr. Srimal. So with that we end our session, our talk, Global Sri Lankan Forum talk show on international affairs, World Vision, and see you soon with another similar program. And good evening and good morning to everybody.
Thank you, and yes, I wish you the same one. Yeah, to end the Global Sri Lanka Forum in Canada and elsewhere. Thank you.